We are reaching the end of June, and Texas has already seen extreme heat and very little rain.
Yes, drought concerns bring many thoughts to mind. Things like water shortages, the increased risk of wildfires. But what do drought conditions mean for our trees? To talk about that is Carl Flock, a woodland ecologist with Texas A&M's Forest Service. Mr. Flock, good morning. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Obviously, it's been very hot and dry so far in the early summer. What does this mean for the state of Texas sort of as a whole when it comes to our trees?
So during periods of extreme drought like this, what we see is a lack of moisture in the soil. And that lack of soil moisture translates to a lack of available water for the trees to uptake. And of course, trees need water for their biological processes, things such as photosynthesis, the movement of carbohydrates around the tree, and the use of those carbohydrates for processes such as growth and defense. So without that available water, the tree starts to become a little stressed. It can't grow quite as well. It can't defend itself as much. And that's going to be our main concern during these drought times.
Carl, how can you tell if you have a tree on your property if that tree is in trouble at this point?
So you're going to look for signs. Early symptoms are going to show up in the foliage because that is what has been produced the most recently. It's produced almost every year. And so you're going to look for poorly formed or malformed leaves starting to turn yellow, browning around the tips and edges, getting a little crispy, or even leaves starting to fall off the tree. These are all early warning signs that the tree could be experiencing that stress.
So is it just drought? I mean, what other kinds of things may cause some of these stresses? I guess drought is the big one that we're talking about now, but what else, what other risks are there to our trees?
Right. Here in Texas, drought is certainly one of our biggest stressors. But other risks could be extreme temperatures, too hot, too cold. We could have too much water, actually, construction damage, compaction of the root area, too much shade, over pruning. There are a number of different things that can lead to stressors in trees that really reduce the overall ability of that tree to function efficiently.
And what about watering your tree? What suggestions do you have? How do we know if our trees are getting enough?
The first thing I would do would be to monitor the tree, look for those signs of stress, because a native tree or a well-adapted tree should be able to get through drought without too much harm. If you are seeing those symptoms we talked about, give the tree a good long soaking, really to the point in which the water starts to pool on the surface of the tree, of the soil. And when you water the tree, make sure not to just water at the trunk or out at what we would call the drip line, the area at the edge of the canopy, but watering that entire area underneath the shade, the canopy of the tree, to the point where it starts to pool, just run off. That's what we want to see, because we want the water to soak in deep into the soil where the tree's roots actually are.
Carl, do trees have an expected lifespan depending on what kind of tree they are? I mean, is there some point where we just say, you know what, this oak is just so old, maybe we just need to take it out now and it's past its lifespan? Or is that a real thing? How does that fit in?
Trees, depending on the species of tree, they will live longer. Some are short-growing, short-lived, some live longer. Really what you're looking at, though, is over time, those stressors that we talked about, they kind of act cumulatively. So you can have conditions exist in which the tree really starts to decline over time when it's exposed to many of these stressors. And then we start to see secondary things move in, things like funguses, insects. Very often that's what we see at the very end of a tree's life, and we assume that that's what killed the tree, when in reality it's been events leading up to this for many years, typically.
Carl, what about root exposure? If you see some of the roots coming up, they're running through your yard, is that just an aesthetic issue, or is that a problem with the tree, or how do you combat that?
It can be a problem with the tree. Very often what you're seeing is erosion of the soil, oftentimes either wind or water moving the soil away from around the tree. One of the best ways to combat that, and one of the best general tree health care practices, is to apply mulch around the base of the tree. When we mulch the base of a tree, we help to cover up those exposed roots, regulate soil temperature, retain moisture in the soil. And so that's really one of the best practices for tree care in general, general and for taking care of those exposed roots.
Is that something we should be doing each and every spring? I mean, I kind of want to because, you know, the leaves have all fallen over the winter and it's dirty. So it's more than just an aesthetic, as Lisa was saying. We really should be mulching, putting new mulch each year, maybe under the tree.
So in Southeast Texas, trees will, it's fairly hot and humid. The mulch will break down fairly quickly. So every year, every other year is probably about the right time scale for that. What you want to see is you want to see a thin layer of mulch, 1 to 3 inches in depth. And that's going to be enough to retain moisture in the soil, suppress weeds, all the necessary processes that we want to see.
Carl, when it comes to trimming your tree and those limbs are getting, maybe they're hitting a part of your roof that you don't want, is there a safer way for you to do it so that you don't harm the tree? I'm very worried about my husband getting up there. He might fall off a ladder too. That's also a concern. But
that is absolutely a concern.
What kind of damage can you do to your tree?
Well, so you can definitely over prune a tree, and that can be another stressful situation for the tree. You can also make poor cuts that are hard to seal over for the tree, and that could lead to rot, decay getting into the tree. So when we talk about tree care and pruning, my first recommendation is usually if you are not super informed on the issue, hire a certified arborist to do the work for you, and that should also take care of the safety concern with your husband getting up on the roof as well.
Yes.
So that would really be my first recommendation is get someone that really knows what they're doing to take care of that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, and Carl, just, I mean, maybe it goes without saying, but I want to ask you anyways, just some of the benefits for keeping trees on the property. I mean, shade is the obvious one that pops out to me, but what else?
Absolutely. So, you know, there are some obvious things. You get wildlife benefits, of course, the beauty of having trees. But like you mentioned, shade is incredibly important here in Texas. And that's kind of intuitive. We'd rather walk between stores on the shade side of the street. We'd rather be out barbecuing in our backyard in the shade. But there's some real energy saving measures as well. Having trees around your house, shading the house will reduce your overall air conditioning bill. So when we think about something as valuable as water, you know, we definitely want to conserve water during these drought periods, but we also don't want to lose our trees, something that we have taken. It's a resource that's taken decades to develop. And so we want to make sure that we are keeping that resource intact through these dry periods. The idea is really to keep the trees alive, have them survive, but they might not necessarily thrive this year.
All really great information.
It makes us think like we're in a little bit of control, at least, if we can try to keep our trees healthy, and it helps our home, helps our neighborhood, all together.
And Carl, before you go, real quick, is there a surefire way to know that your tree is just too far gone? I know a lot of us post-freeze had kept trees up and thought, okay, is this thing coming back? But how do you know for sure?
There really isn't a surefire way. One recommendation I would give is give it time. Trees might lose leaves because of the freeze, because of this drought, and it might not necessarily be a sign that they are completely dead. So my first recommendation would be give it time. There are a few things you can do. Take a branch, scratch away the bark with a knife or something like that. And if you're still seeing some light green tissue or whitish tissue just underneath the bark surface, that's probably a pretty good sign that there's still some life there within that branch.
And go save that tree.
Yes.
Carl, thanks so much for the great talk and the great advice. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care.
All right, Carl Flock, woodland ecologist with Texas A&M's Forest Service.